sometimes it really interferes with us being able to hear what you have to say. Oh. Okay, we need an approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion for that? I believe these minutes have been approved, those that were joined by the city council already, I believe, but we must also approve them as a formality. So is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, Ruth,
We
sorry.
need a roll call for that.
I am sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, please.
Higgerson,
Here?
yes or no for
Yes.
approval of the minutes? McGill,
Yes.
Neely,
Here, yes.
Parch,
Yes.
Tarazinski,
Yes.
5 yes.
Thank you. I have not received any notice of anyone wishing to make public participation to speak this evening, and Ruth, you say no one has?
No, nothing.
Okay, thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. Well then, we have no old business and we can move directly to the new business. Okay, we are here this evening to have a full discussion of all this excellent material that has been prepared for us by any number of folks here and those folks, some folks not here, also the department heads, city manager, the assistant city manager, the accountant, all sorts of people involved, and I'm quite grateful for this material. Datina. Hey. So, I don't want to take up a lot of time with any extraneous remarks that I might make. I do want to open the floor and have a full discussion, but I will ask City Manager Nicholas, would you like to make a few introductory remarks before we discuss this material?
I mean, and let me ask as well, are you okay if I drop, is that okay? We're safely distanced. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm glad that you don't want to have a long formal overture here, because I don't intend to offer one, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation tonight. There's a lot of material here, and what a year it's been so far. So we've got lots we can talk about. I want to orient you to people in the room who've been helping me. Josh Bolt, and some of you have met Josh, and maybe some of you haven't, Assistant City Manager for a couple months now. And he been very helpful to me in pulling together the numbers. You have lots and lots of numbers here, and he's just dug in, and he's been voracious about it, and that's been a big help to me. Susan Hama is not here, but she is our senior accountant and has also been very active in helping me pull together the sausage, so to speak, that eventually comes together, not just for tonight, but then comes together in the form of the proposed budget, which you will see in about a month. Let me also orient you to what's before you at your desks. Some more paper that you didn't see, and I thought it would be good to have, or if nothing else, you can take it with. Some of it just amplifies what's already in your background, and some of it is new and maybe of some interest. And we don't have to talk about it tonight, but I'm happy to talk to you about it. If you wish, we can talk on the phone or otherwise. So first, you've got I think everybody's got the packet that I sent, right? And that had a spreadsheet in it that showed you what the sort of what the history was of our general fund expenditures and revenues in very broad categories. And then I also included a printout of all of the numbers, if you will, the proposed 2021 budget numbers and some historic numbers for previous fiscal years for the entire general fund. And because this is only an hour and a half or 2 hours, we don't have time to go through all the funds as we will over 2 nights in November. But I thought because we have spent some time talking about certain capital funds that I would also do some detailed spreadsheets. They're color-coded so you can kind of follow the bouncing ball, and I've done that. Also attached a very preliminary fund balance summary, which matches up with the general fund, but also all of the funds, which you'll find balanced in terms of revenues and expenditures for the projection of 2021. And some other things that I've laid at your desk tonight. One thing I meant to have for you, and I'm sorry it wasn't in the packet, and that just as we have a general fund revenue summary, very broad categories, you'll see one for expenditures at your desk. Looks the same, it's a front and back, and we can touch on that in the course of the evening if you'd like. Another thing, I talked to Tom earlier. May I speak with you in first name basis? Would you prefer that? Okay.
Please.
One thing you saw in my introduction, and as we've talked about, and we talked about at the joint meeting in August, we've got a couple new developments that we are going to be benefit from, and all local taxing bodies will over time. But in the near term, in the next year, much of the new value that they're bringing to the land that they have purchased and they're developing on will not be an enhanced value in terms of the taxable EAV. And we're about a year away from the benefit of Ferrara and a little bit more from the full benefit of the first phase of Facebook. And I know you're aware of that, but I gave you a sheet that shows what the projection is. There are multiple phases that we are hoping to see. There's been no official announcement beyond the first phase of Facebook, but we're hoping to see multiple phases, and also hoping to see another phase that you don't see yet at Ferrara in terms of manufacturing. So if you want to see the gross numbers, here they are. We can come to that also later on if you'd like. So any questions so far? Good. Please, along the way, just interrupt me as if I'm speeding along and you want to rest on a point. Happy to do so. I'm going to highlight this part of what I've projected for 2021, and this is something I hinted at when we had our joint meeting. We have not only been braving the winds created by the pandemic, but we also have some unresolved pension business downstate. These are affecting our revenue stream and also what we have in the way of spending capacity for general operations. We have already gone more than halfway across the stream with an idea that was mentioned back in mid-August, and we had to get going on it, and we had kind of head nods that sounds good, and talked more with the council about the possibility of doing what the bond agencies call a scoop and toss. Basically, as we were starting to look at the budget back in June, July, it was obvious that the $1.8 million that we were looking at for debt service out of the general fund was insupportable without taking a huge cut out of our general fund reserve. And then there were other challenges, the $4.5 million roughly in revenue that we weren't going to see in 2020. So what could we do about that? And we found out that we could basically take a hiatus for a year and spread it over 3 years at the end of our geo debt schedule. And I've portrayed what that means in the text of your background for tonight. I've also rolled in the capital leases, worked with our auditor. I had some guesses, and they weren't too bad, but the auditor firmed them up a little bit, cleaned them up. And so that table you see there has been through Sickich, and it includes the leases that we entered just in the last couple of months for vehicles. And Bob, I know that was one of your suggestions about a year ago. We've done that. But because we can't pay for that out of our operating fund, we're gonna pay for it out of the lease, the annual lease payments out of one of our capital funds. They become capital leases. They become part of the debt service obligation that we have, and that becomes also part of the overlapping debt. Since most of the population in DeKalb County is in DeKalb City, we are supporting two different calculations of what the countywide debt is, our own, and then we're contributing to the overall county debt too. So that's there, Chris, for further conversation if you'd like. Okay, what we've tried to do also is to make best guesses at what federal dollars might come our way. The first federal assistance or bailout plan called the CARES Act is at the state level called the Local Cure Act. So if I move into that title, it's the same money. And at the state level, the federal government expects that there will be consideration of all the local municipalities. We have 1,200 villages and towns in the state of Illinois, that those that are in a position to receive any qualifying funds will get that. Our theoretical allocation back in March, April was 1.8 million. You have to qualify for it, and it was to be used for a variety of purposes, and one was to reimburse cities, villages, and towns for very obvious COVID-type responses. Also, if you have first responders, for instance, who have to be quarantined, and you have to bring in people on overtime or find other ways to provide the same level of services, that those extra costs could qualify, and so on and so forth. And when you add up all those layers, you could theoretically, in DeKalb, reach 1.8 million. We have, at this point, in our opinion, conservatively justified about 1.3 million, and there will be more. We made our first submittal back in a couple weeks ago, and I want to thank Josh Bolt for doing that. It was a Herculean effort. We had to develop spreadsheets, interconnecting spreadsheets of different types of what we consider to be qualified expenditures, and we blew them away, actually. They got them and they said, well, you could do something simpler than this. But we papered them with everything that needed to be there in terms of background and supporting documents. And thank you for that, Josh. Well, we've received some of that. I think it's 113,000. So we're obviously a ways away, but the question that we don't have, we're not sitting on top of the answer of, is how quickly that can get through the state system. But we anticipate that we'll get at least $750,000 before the end of this fiscal year, which ends on December 31st, and get another 600,000 in 2021, which would probably be, yes, Tom?
Just have they approved that first go-around, that 750?
They haven't, way it is they haven't said, yeah, all that 750 looks good to us, or that 1.3 looks good to us. That they're not telling us what they're just sending us checks, and they haven't questioned. We have a contact person. As I said, they were impressed with our background, which I think is a lot more than they're seeing. Some people are just saying, yeah, we did it, and pay us, and we're on the other extreme of that right now. I think we're good. We haven't heard that we're not. Leave it at that. Yes, Bob?
I'm assuming this is federal money
Yes.
funneled through the state?
Funneled through the state,
Okay.
to the municipalities.
Okay, that's what I
Yes.
thought.
There's another general revenue that we are anticipating, and I want to thank our local firefighters union for making us aware of this. As you probably know, if you don't, when we do an ambulance run for a Medicare patient, Medicaid, or a variety of other programs that are part of that system, federal system, we might get 80% of the cost of that reimbursed to us over a period of time. We've never done better than that. But there is actually at the state of Illinois, and it's available as long as funds are available, and there are funds right now, for reimbursing that 20% gap. And it was not a well-publicized program. The acronym is GEMT. I referred to it in my background. And we discovered this with the help of our firefighters who were looking along with us to find, scratching, turning over rocks, trying to find some other sources. And we investigated. We talked to the communities in the color counties where much of that money has been going over the years, and we have put forward our application, and we're looking conservatively at another $400,000. Now that is a recurring source of income, and that's important. The COVID-related federal dollars are a one-time, obviously, which is good, and if we could be guaranteed that in a year or whenever it's going to be that we're back on our feet and we're not wearing these and things are good, restaurants are open, you know, the whole 9 yards, that maybe that one-time thing was just right. If it continues beyond that, we don't know where we'll be with other federal programs. There's obviously another package that's hung up in Congress now, so what will happen after the election, we don't know. We can't count on it, so we're figuring that's one time, and it may be better than that.
Just a question,
Yes, Tom?
just to clarify.
Speaking to the mic.
Is this part of the Medicare or Medicaid expansion program? Is this a component of the Medicaid expansion program, or is this something that existed before?
It's been there for a while.
It's been there
We just-
before that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you. So it will
Yeah.
continue?
Yes. Yes. But again, it's subject to, so right now, the state has some money, it's also got some COVID-related money, and what happens in future years is anybody's, but it's intended to be a recurring program. Okay. And it's to incent communities to be aggressive in reaching out to persons who are needing to use our emergency services and so forth as their health care. They can't afford health insurance, or they don't have health insurance, or they otherwise have choices they have to make, and health insurance is against, housing and food and so forth. Okay, questions? Any other questions? Time. Okay, that's the revenue picture, and on the expenditure side, as you know, we talked about this in August. I'm not going to go over all the details again, but we made a first round of cuts. Oh, there's one other thing I put at your desk. It says presentation to Moody's Investor Service. So there's it's a different presentation of some of the same information that was given to you tonight in your background, specifically designed to show that we're fiscally stable and so forth. We had our Moody's interview last week on the 21st this week. We hear what they're going to do about our bond rating. This is not just because we're in the market right now on the refunding, but because about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, we were put on the watch list. We're right now rated 1A, and or A1, excuse me, and we could only go up or down from that. They usually don't continue after the follow-up review, and they have to do that review within about 2 years. So coincidentally, it was going to happen. We had a very good interview, but this person then takes his observations and takes it to the committee, and who knows what, Bob, you're a banker, you know about those committees are tough. So we'll see what they want to do. We're not planning any long-term debt in the near future, so whatever happens may not have any particular impact in the short term, but the background here is interesting, a little more elaborative of development in this area than we're going to talk about tonight. Okay, in addition to the cuts that we talked about and were made back in May, we have seen that those were done. As you look forward into '21, you see, and you know, probably the best reference point for you is this color chart. You can kind of see in gross categories what's happening, the ups and the downs. So this year, by the end of the year, we're going to be out of whack in terms of revenues and expenditures, even though we planned back in this time last year to be very comfortably ahead of the game. And then we revised our budget in May. That says FY 2020 budget, that's the revised budget, not what we started with, and we're gonna do okay this year. We're going to hopefully even do better next year. We're actually gonna be imbalanced in FY 21, and with hopefully a cushion of about $1.2 million, but a lot can change, and right now we're seeing the change happening. This was put together, and I think you got your packet, within a week of the most recent executive order that came to pass concerning our restaurants and bars. That is having a very significant effect. That's also affecting sales taxes. And that's a big chunk out of the annual sales tax picture. And how long will that last? We're stuck in a region. We tried to have DeKalb County removed as a special case because we were of the 7 or 8 counties. There was one very rural county to the southwest of the region, and then we were the next best. We were safely within, at the time, the 8%. We're still riding at that point, but I understand that Winnebago County was up at 10 the last check about 2 days ago. So we're just going to go with the group, and I don't know how we can affect what they do. That's the frustration. And but that's going to hit us. Heaven forbid we can't get through the holidays without some change here. That makes it that's the selling point for the whole year, right? I mean, the Valentine's Day is important, and back to school sales and so forth. But it's the holidays that make or break a family business in retail. And retail downtown is, for instance, and also on the Sycamore Road corridor is affected when people can't work and they're not going out there and buying as much. So who knows? And we hope that changes. I do know that we do a hospitality report to the council. They're going to have their monthly report on the next agenda for the 26th. And it shows that even before that executive order, the restaurant, bar, the hospitality return had pointed down. So we came out of June with a number that was pointing up, although we were down year on year from 2019 by about 13%, but it looked like we're getting better, we're getting closer. And the back to school sales were just not yet registering, but we knew we had that ahead. Then we find out, just last week we got the August numbers, and that's before the executive order came out, and they were down, so now we're down 22%. So now where are we now? We could be 35, 40%. That's what we're wrestling with. But I'm happy to say on the spending side, and I should have mentioned this earlier, we've had very good conversations with our employees. They get it. They understand where we are. I'm happy to say we're in negotiations now with our fire union and also with AFSCME, which represents most of our public works employees and others. And we are, and management group I've talked to, and we're looking at a no increase, no wage increase, no salary increases for FY21. So that's baked into the numbers you see here, even though there's more conversation and more decisions to be made.
Just to follow that up. So the contracts, the labor contracts we have exist, and are they being modified?
Mhm. The fire and AFSCME contract expired at the end of this year, so we had to enter negotiations anyway. The police contract expired at the end of 2019, and we settled with them in early February.
Okay.
So that's, we all met in May when we made the first level cuts, and it was again, it was a collaborative thing. I think at this point, and everyone agreed at the table, and representatives from all the bargaining groups and management, that the numbers are the numbers. Here's where they are. We're not hiding anything. Here it is. We all had a feel for where we might be going. We were hopeful, but we didn't know back in early part of May, late part of April. And so a number of positions were simply not filled that should have been filled in other circumstances to maintain services, and some were put on the bubble, so to speak, that we didn't know, even if these planned ones were filled, that we could fill any more, and so forth. That was 12 positions at the time, and that has affected overtime, and so have the quarantines that have happened amongst first responders and others. And so overtime, you'll see, as you go through the individual department budget, you'll see a spike in some overtime, but on the other hand, some savings because we haven't filled positions. I'll stop. Do you want me to, I'll stop on the general fund, and maybe we, after we have some back and forth, then maybe we can go into the capital side, or do you want me to keep going?
I think it's a good idea.
Good stop
I
now?
think your idea is good. Let's stop and see if folks have anything they want to explore further, discuss, anything.
Yeah, please. I hope so.
Please.
Sure. I'll take this off if we're gonna talk much.
Good.
Just for an overall reaction. I think the news was positive back in our August discussion regarding cost reductions, headcount containment, general hiring freeze. I had not been aware that we had gotten to a zero relative to wage increases for 2021. To me, that's a very positive statement. And I guess the contracts are open except for FOP from what I just heard.
Correct.
Okay, and so it's zero across the board? Excellent. I think that's a positive statement for all departments and really an accomplishment. That's great news.
Well, you know, I should say we haven't inked it yet, but we.
Okay, well, that's what's in the budget.
I don't have any doubt that I really don't have any serious doubt that we'll get there, and we will address other things, language questions and other things in the contract, and we're hoping that in the case of fire, have a longer-term contract. I think with AFSCME, they're content to have a one-year contract, and we'll come back and we see where we are.
So, just kind of going back to your recap a little bit, and I'm going to go back to your page, which is our page 3, the recap. And I'm just going to go to the bottom lines on the ending fund balances, okay?
Yep.
So if we can follow along with that, I'm going to go back to 19 actual. We ended the year at 10.5 million, or 29%. We projected in 2020 in our budget to go to 12.3, and that would take us to 33%. In lieu of the 12.3, we are now projecting to be at 9.9. So we're 2.4 short, and 4 million revenue hit. You offset with partial cost reductions, and we're taking some income, I guess, on the CARES Act to
Correct.
kind of net that whole thing out,
Correct.
right? So that's where we are, including the cost reductions we've already achieved. So that puts us back at 28% of that reduced expenditure number, and we're hoping to drive that number back to 11.1 million with a fairly significant revenue increase, back up to 36.8 million, which is really a $2 million increase in revenues year over year,
But
right?
obviously, I'm hoping for a recovery.
Yes, well, that's kind of where I was going.
And I'm figuring, oh, don't let me interrupt. Finish
No,
your
well,
thought.
well, that's
I was
really
just
where,
gonna say, so, I may have hinted about, I don't know that I wrote it at the background for August, but we're still planning on a third and fourth quarter in 2021 that reflect a recovery. Not, as you can see, the same as where we thought we'd be a year ago this time, but in fact down a couple million, but still better than this year, which has been a disaster in our memory. Not since 2008 probably has it been this bad.
so the $2 million in revenue improvements, right now, it looks like property tax is a big discussion item, I'm sure. That's 800,000. And then the rest of it is recovery in some of those revenue pieces that you had alluded to.
Yep.
Better sales tax,
Yep.
better home rule sales tax, better bar, and
Service charges.
quite a bit of recovery in service charges, almost 800,000, of which 400,000 is
Yeah.
part of this program.
So part of that is interestingly, the fastest rising source of income in our service charges area and generally in the budget are ambulance services. And we were down almost 400 or 500, I'm thinking by the end of, now I'm thinking like it's the end of the year, of 400,000 or 500,000 below what we projected originally, in the original budget, Tom, which doesn't show here. I guess we could have had a seventh column, but I ran out of space. It could have said like the budget, the original budget before the revised budget back in May. And if you looked at the revenue line items one by one, all the way down to the bottom, you've seen that ambulance services was to do better. So we've been hit there, and then there are other service charges as well that we've been hit on.
So from a risk perspective, as you point out with the COVID numbers and so forth, hopefully there'll be some positive news on that, either with vaccines or other things, but,
Testing is a key, Tom, I think, in everybody. We still have abysmal testing in our area anyway. Maybe it's better in other areas. Availability, pain, it's not the nicest experience to go through. And also the time it takes to get a read. Other places around the world, I'm told, excluding Russia and some other places, they are able to find out certainly within a day, sometimes more rapidly, within a few hours.
Yep.
Why that's not generally available in the richest country in the world, I can't tell you, but that's a philosophical question that we'd have to spend some time talking about. But it certainly isn't operating at our local level. And when we had a recent scare, it wasn't quite as bad as we thought it would be in one of our first responding departments. I'll speak generally. I spent the better part of the morning driving around the hospital to every urgent care place trying to find somebody, trying to throw some weight around. Who can get us the fastest return in it? You know, I was given the same answer. Well, you come in tomorrow, or we're out of tests for today, and we can find out. It'll take you about 2 to 3 days. And this is what I needed, because we have to plan whether we're going to have certain essential services. So that's a problem. Well, I'm expecting that will be more or less solved in the next 8 months. It's a long time in the middle of a pandemic. We ought to, gosh. Don't get me started.
well, the reason for bringing it up is trying to paint a picture of what the risk factor
Yes,
is, right?
yes, yes.
And if I was looking at the revenue side and said we were gonna be flat, exclude the property tax debate, you've got 400,000 more in income from this other area. We're at risk maybe, if it was flat, 800 to $1 million more or less.
Yeah.
Okay. just for
And
consideration.
we've got a little more, you can see where we're gonna be with our reserve. But you're right, that's generally what it is.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions, but
Please.
open the floor.
Bill, I have two things, if I could add a comment on that.
Yes.
One reference I thought that was valuable that I haven't seen anywhere else is the IML, the Illinois Municipal League. It's the city's lobbying group. They compared the recovery to a Nike swoosh symbol. Not so much a U or V or W, but a Nike swoosh. And I think it's up to us to try to analyze where exactly in that symbol we are. And then my second thing I wanted to add is the 1.3 that we're counting in on the revenue side for the CARES Act. That's not the 1.816 that is guaranteed for us, but we have to go out there and prove it. And so Jeff Kiker, our representative, did a wonderful job having a webinar this past week, and IML, again, has done a good job in communicating with DCEO about what it is we can qualify for expenses. And so as long as we prove it, we should be able to qualify our personnel expenses to go out and get exactly what we need and what we're owed.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what this is. Touche.
Thank you.
Talking about revenue, and Tom touched on the property tax expectations. So, we always have to be mindful of the rate we might end up with, and at this time of the year, we're rolling the dice as to what the final EAV numbers are going to be. And we won't really know until we've already made some pretty firm decisions about the budget, and the Board of Review has had a chance to release all of its findings. So I acknowledged in my background of the levy options. May I just move into that real quickly?
Any objections? Is that okay?
Still in the general fund here. But this is the area where city government touches every household. This is as important as it gets. And I did some calculations for you and a variety of options, and all of these were based on certain common assumptions that the new construction would be around $2 million, and that was going to be primarily because of Home 2 Suites and the Plaza DeKalb project. Wish that it was some piece of Farrar and even the land value of Facebook, but that isn't going to happen. And so, if you want to end up at least, or at most, where we were with our rate last year, or better, in terms of a reduction, basically, in the rate. And you want to get at that 1.15. If you go in your background to page 10, you can see the beginning of these levy options. This was, option number 3 was based on the assumption we'd be at that $7,060,000, which is what's on the sheet here. And I half-heartedly, I just mentioned that because I said, well, it gets us there, but boy, anything, the whisper of a bad guess on the EAV or something else, and you're off. And in my experience, you usually are higher, not lower. So I would recommend to you tonight, I'll depart from my professorial comments here, and just say I think the sounder choice is the option number 4, and what I just handed you was what the general fund reserve would look like if we went with option number 4, and you can see the differences in that drop of about $1.2 million, and that changes the projected FY21 year-end general fund reserve. And I think that's the sounder choice. But can everybody see what I'm talking about there? So, yeah. I really think it's on the border of foolhardy to try to guess that number 3 will work. And tonight, at some point, if we can have conversation on it now, fine, or we can come back to this. I think the council is looking for some kind of recommendation
Yes.
from you. And there could be other, I could have had 8 options here, I just picked some thresholds. Each one of them addresses what the actuary said we ought to be contributing for the fire and police pensions, but it's not the total amount of what is owed. And in each case, we're gonna have to dip into sales and use taxes or other general revenues other than property tax, because every dollar of the property tax we put in each of these options into paying the pension obligations that we have. And the total gap is about $1,030,000, and that is shown in the notes in the bottom of this page. And for option 4, there's no corporate take at all for general operations. It's all going in, and then we still owe a chunk, that $1,031,368 for the shortfall. And where does that come from? Tom and I had a very brief conversation earlier today, and rightfully pointed out that I'm showing that gap money more obviously this year by showing it in the, if you look at that one-page expenditures, it says on the top, general fund expenditures. If you look in the back, and you see it says transfers out. So I've identified what each of the two, the fire and the police pensions would be paying. That's the gap. That those two together, forget about the library fund transfer at the bottom. They add up to $1,031,368. So in the past, that's come out of, it's shown as a journal entry. But if you're reading the budget, you're not sure. In fact, my first year, I thought, well, where'd that come from? It didn't come out of property tax. It didn't come out of general fund reserve. There was no council action specifically to say we're gonna take this and we're gonna transfer it into a pay line. So I want to show it, and just my preference. So somebody reading the budget can see, oh, this is where that comes from.
I worry sometimes about not only the amounts of money that we are due from the state of Illinois through the federal government, but the timing. Bill, do you have any concerns about the timing, and do we have plans that say we get the money, but it's 6, 8, or 10 months later than what we counted on?
Yeah, and
Where
that's,
are we gonna plug those kind of gaps?
that's often the case. Boy, airport money is the worst. 3 years, and so forth. But everybody at every level right now knows that in the current pandemic circumstances, people need the money now. We have seen a quicker response, and I don't know, Tanya, you've seen that too. And so it's been pretty good. We got a real quick response. I mean, Josh hadn't submitted our information, wasn't a matter of days.
Yeah, that 113, as soon as it got to the comptroller's office, it was back 4 business days, probably at most. It was
That's a
very
miracle.
quick.
Wow.
It is.
It's a miracle.
It is.
Yeah.
It won't last, but for the next year, hopefully it does last. But you're right. If we knew that there were warrants that would commit the state, but they just haven't gotten around to paying it, that would help. Without a warrant and without any sign of the money, you have to resort to your general fund reserve. and
Reserve would be your first
That'd be
thing.
the first, yeah.
Just some comments on the overall, on the property tax. As I look at, and I'll use option 4, so if we look at that, 6,866,000 is the request,
Right.
the proposal, and this year, the estimate for total property tax, 6,269,000. And that's just looking at the current year revenue projection, so, which is really behind us. So that's a $600,000 increase, or just about 10% increase in property taxes on the city portion of the tax bill. In the norm that the council had been using for past discussions is a flat number plus new construction,
Yeah,
plus something for inflation.
yeah,
So allowing 2% for inflation plus 2 million in new construction, which in the notes gets you to about 6.4. And we're asking 6.8, so there's about a 400,000 ask. So that's one part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion goes to how do we cover a $500,000 increase in year-over-year pension obligations, more or less. And that's what's baked in here. When you go back and look at the numbers and add back that $1 million or so that's down in other transfers, and you add that back to expenses for pension, that gets you to about a $500,000, maybe $600,000 increase year over year. And that trend is going to continue, as I see it. Year after year, we're going to see an increase necessary to get us to the home if they keep that bogey where it is in 2040.
right, it has to change.
It's
It
a
will bankrupt
ramping-
every community in the state.
So
So,
I guess the way I would look at it is knowing what the council has done in the last 3 or 4 previous years, and that deficit that you talk about has really been there every year, growing every year too, as to the pension obligation. But we do bring back TIF. Next year we get that back in. We do a property in lieu of tax for the water department, which is $300, and we do get our service money back, all of which those service charges that GMET or TE, whatever that is, plus whatever we capture, has a pension component to those revenues in the neighborhood of 15 to 20%. So I would just remind everyone that those are all ways of capturing pension revenues that aren't obvious in just looking at the way our general statement looks. So for further discussion, I would just put that on the table. So to me, we're looking at a $400,000 to $500,000 increase over and above what the council has been doing on a normative basis. And then on a go-forward basis, and one doesn't like to look too far, but you can't help it in this case, because if it's a one-year thing and we get to Facebook and Ferrara, based on what's in the Moody's investors analysis, there's almost 203 million in this estimate of EAV,
right.
and at 45% of the city's portion of that, that's $1.1 million. Okay, so on a go-forward basis, you bring $1.1 million in. Someone asked at the council level last time, what happens to, what should we be doing with that? I think we've just spoken for it.
We have.
On a go-forward
have.
basis, that's a $500,000 a
We have.
year, that doesn't take long.
And you know, you give away the development bonus if you don't do something about that pension problem downstate. Because you'll never catch up. You can't have enough Facebooks over time. So the IML, just an answer to that, I think we, as a community and a fairly sizable county in terms of wealth, have to be leaders, not followers in this. The Municipal League has made the pension issue their #1 priority in the regular session. The veto session is going to be upside down. I don't know what, it's never good for a substantive conversation about these things, but maybe that will come up as well in a thoughtful way. But the spring session has to provide some relief. Now, what I worry about, frankly, is that they'll kick the can down the road and just say it's 2050.
Mhm.
And then you get about 2 years of a plateauing, not even a plateau, but it's a milder slope to the ramp. And so instead of $1 million, it might be back down a little bit to where it was 2 years ago, which was 566,000. And then it was 1.1 million last year, and the difference this year is some other things that we're doing, but I think the solution is to move now toward a different actuarial method of calculating the pension obligation, much as the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund did. Now, why are they at 90% funding? And that's down from 95, I think, 10 years ago. The Great Recession knocked them down a little bit. It's because they don't figure that everybody who's alive that is being covered by the pension is going to die in 15 years. And much like you do with your house, you remortgage in 15 years. You have different lives, different pool, boom, boom, boom. It doesn't come for nothing. We pay into it, the employer, the taxpayers pay into it, the employee pays into it. But going forward, it breaks this ramp. There's no other way to break that ramp that I can see, and I'm not alone in that. I mean, some pretty good minds, a lot better than mine, have been wrestling with that. But kicking the ball down the road, Tom, as you say, is not, or you indicated you were indicating, is not the way, because in 3-4 years, we're back where we were, and how do you, what do you do then? It's the same thing.
Just a follow-up question. The IML approach, do they have a specific formula, calculation methodology they're going to propose? Are they?
They're going to have to.
Oh, they don't yet?
They don't, and they don't, but they don't support the idea of kicking the ball down the road. So it's got to be something along the lines of what I just suggested. It was certainly a year ago on the table to look real hard at the IMRF approach, but that would have been too much. So what we did a year ago was to create the large statewide police pension and fire pension funds, which deal with the investment side, and the local boards still deal with decisions about pensioning and so forth. So that was the first step, because they're the ones who'd have to manage whatever package they come up with. It was a two-step from the beginning, and to get to that second step, that's really the hard. It was hard to get through the first step. The second step is going to be even harder. There's a lot of other things on the table.
Chair. Well, you mentioned more Facebooks and Ferraras, and certainly that would be, one of our primary goals. Sitting here and looking at this year's budget, I personally become concerned with departments being stretched thin. So, in other words, we've talked about overtime, but we're talking about essential services for the city of DeKalb, and it's hard to really get a good grasp of, how are those services being delivered? Are people really stretched out thin? We've talked about overtime. So this is a very difficult time with the pandemic, and we know that, you hear that term, well, we have to tighten our belts and do these things, but how can we really get through this? If you can comment on, again, excellent collaboration with departments, but how can we really get through this without being stretched too thin? And I know that's probably the magic equation that we're working on, but it's a concern.
It's a concern, you're right, and it's a concern of mine, it's a concern of everybody's. I think I know the council shares your thoughts, and the Finance Advisory Committee, I'm sure, does too. First of all, I have to say, we have a fine workforce, and that people are willing to do this. Some people have left to do other things, but on the whole, 98% are still here and standing and showing up. There are firefighters that work 4 or 5 days in a row. Police officers that every shift are running from the time they show up until the time they go home, and then staying over into the next shift or starting early. Public Works, which was a pretty deep cut into their workforce because of the aftermath of the Great Recession, had led to thin responses in certain areas. It's even worse now. And we're still sitting on positions. So what I've told our bargaining groups and what I've told individual employees is, we're gonna, as we see money, we're gonna take steps to shore up the bodies that we need to do the work, so that we don't drive people away or drive them into the ground or make them sick or any of those rest of those things. But I can't describe my gratitude for our firefighters, police officers, public works officials, the people in City Hall. I mean, we're all one deep. That's not exaggeration. A lot of places said that 5 years ago. Well, we are truly one deep. Somebody called the other day and said, "Can you get your marketing person to do it?" In there, can you go out and clean my catch basins? Well, we'll do it, but you know we're doing 5 other things that people aren't there, and ambulances don't stop running. Police officers don't stop responding. We can't. And a few times this past summer, when we've had 2 or 3 people out in each of these various departments, you can imagine how it got. And people just stepped up. So I'm very grateful. I don't know how we can appropriately thank those people, but I think we need to do so whenever we can.
You mentioned the hiring and so forth. Are there any new hires in the budget? Other than this new department?
We're gonna fill as the money comes in. We have to fill some slots as the money comes in. We're gonna refill some, you know, we drew a line. I'm not gonna go any lower than that, so as people leave or retire or whatever, we're gonna fill a minimum position. Like we were, I'll give you an example, police department. So 3 years ago, the council set the optimal staffing level at 65 sworn officers. At the end of the year, 2021, we'll have 61 in the budget. And we're at 58 right now. So, and I could go through all the departments like this, that's where we are. So we're gonna fill some existing positions,
Okay.
but we're not hiring.
So, just if we look at the current projection for this year, 2020, and the head
Yep.
count that we have planned in that
Yeah.
estimate,
It's gonna be down a little bit.
it's gonna actually be down year over year, or it'll be flat?
I think it's going to be down a little bit.
Okay.
We're, you know, just in City Hall, it's down, if nothing else, you know, but I don't have this has been an interesting exercise these last weeks, so we've made some decisions and made commitments now to fire, police, and public works for fills.
To hold the line?
Yeah, yep, and we're going to, you know, we count heads in the budget, it's in the front pages, and I just talked to HR today, we're gonna come up with a flow chart or org chart that shows that.
So,
I'm sorry I didn't have it for you tonight.
no, that's okay.
It's a great idea.
I just wanted, if it was frozen year over year, and the reason for that is, there's a new division in
Yes.
your notes.
Yes.
And in there, if you counted all those heads, and I know some of those exist,
Yes.
positions, right?
In some no.
So of those, it says we're gonna spend 2 million more, and we spent 600 now, or 700, so we're gonna spend $1.3 million more in that area.
Yep. So you see there are 2 positions that we are calling.
Page 8 in the handout
Yeah, I'm
we
wrong.
have.
Sorry, thank you. Yes. It says 2 full-time public engagement officers. So thank you, Tom, for setting this up. So those are sworn officers. So those are fills, but they're going in this side of the department. And These are, and you also notice, we're shifting some telecommunication services over. So the idea here is, I suppose if it was, if there was a horrendous, catastrophic event happening, any sworn officer from anywhere on shift that day would go to that. But what we're trying not to do is in just a formal way, say we have a division here and then not act on it. And how do you do that? You have to have some separate dispatching and some separate supervision. And you have to have people who are trained for what they're going to be doing the greater bulk of the day, not what maybe they left the academy knowing. And that's what we're trying to do here, Tom.
Okay. So the real additions here are not.
Public engagement officers and the extra help for, we're looking to bring in some
Mental
mental
health.
health workers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so the public engagement officers are additional.
Yes,
Okay. And the 3 school resource officers already exist.
they do.
Okay, so it's just 2 plus the supporting help. and
But
that's
they're a
another
natural
3.
part of it. I mean, if you had to move anybody over, that would be a natural.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, sir.
it.
Yes, sir.
Lance,
We're good.
anything you would like to ask about? I'm sorry,
No.
Tom, I was assuming you were, okay.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
What else would you like to talk about in terms
That's what I'm,
of the general fund?
Actually, you all, Tom brought up some questions I had, you covered that, they talked about overtime, I was gonna ask about that. Just one other question, with social unrest, Bill, how do you deal with that? You've done a beautiful job for putting this together for us too, by the way, thank you, but how do you anticipate, or is that just, you deal with it as it comes along? I'm thinking winter will slow down some, I know there was a lot of overtime with the marches and some of that unrest, but do you anticipate it going on just like we realize the recovery is gonna take longer than?
Let me take a minute with that response, okay? Thank you, good question. Nobody a year ago, when we were doing the budget, planned on social justice movement as we've had in this country and as we've seen in our community. I'm pleased to say we did not go in the direction of some communities that decided it was going to be business as usual, this was going to be a passing thing. It's not going to be a passing thing, and it shouldn't be. And it's probably time to, it's not probably, it is time to take account of how we treat one another. And that's everybody, and that we are an inclusive community, which all of us feel, everybody in this room feels that we want to be. But clearly we're not. And what can we do? I will say, in the room tonight is Chief Riddell, and his very first action, this is no lie, as the police chief on a Monday, John Petrogallo had just retired. Bob's in charge. We had one of the largest groups we ever had in front of the police station, and Bob walked out, and he didn't tell me this. And he walks to the front, we had all the local chiefs, and we had the state's attorney, and we didn't know, people were angry, and signs that weren't very flattering to police officers, and he goes right to the leaders, which were at the curb, and said, if you will join us, we'd like to kneel and hold hands in solidarity against police brutality. I didn't know he was going to do this. What am I? I'm just a city manager. I don't know this stuff. So we did. And then we walked down to First and Lincoln. It was the first time there was a rally at First and Lincoln. And I got to tell you, there were motorists who weren't real happy about it because people were walking in the street. And so it went all summer, 3 months. 2 arrests happened in the first 2 days. That first day, and I was there, I saw the whole thing. Guy showed up, he was showing off, I don't know, in front of friends or whatever. And he wanted to be the center of attention. He kept getting himself in harm's way. And finally they said, look, come on, we told you 6 times, and they arrested him, released him right away, disorderly conduct, same day, same thing next day. That was it. By the end of the summer, we had engaged a lot of different groups about how we want to change institutionally. And this suggestion came out of that. There were there are several dozen more, and there are some that we're still working on. The council's had a couple of sessions to talk about that. In answer to your question, I think, but for instance, this week there's a speech which will be part of hopefully some follow-on discussions about belonging, you know, and it's coming up, and hopefully some of you will participate in that. There will continue to be discussion, but mostly there has to be interaction. So our police officers who are on the line every day, firefighters, public works officials, all of us have to be more mindful as public servants about how we connect with the people we serve. But as citizens of this town, we're all obliged, I think, to do that and think about it every day, every way, every time we are out and about. Familiarity brings trust, and trust brings respect, and those things are a building block of community. And that's what this is about. Ultimately, that's what it's about. It's as old as humankind. We can do better, and I think we are doing better. I think we are. But it may be too cold soon or too wet to march in the street, but it won't be too cold or too wet to have conversations. And in some cases, pretty brutally frank conversations. We had a lot of them in the last 5-6 months. They'll continue. And we expect a lot of critique of what we're going to be trying to do here at the Community Services Division, but I think it's going to be received respectfully, and then we'll see what we can do with it. And there are other things we're going to do too.
Thank you.
Ms. Washington, what would you prefer that I call you?
Whatever you prefer. Titania is how you pronounce it.
Pardon me?
Titania.
Titania?
Or Ms. Washington, whatever works for you.
Okay, I thought I heard Bill call you Tanya, so I wanted to
Oh, no,
ask.
that's it.
Oh, excuse me. Is there any, this is Titania's first meeting with us, so I didn't
Yeah.
want to move aggressively. Go, what do you think about this stuff? Well, is there anything you would like to talk about?
I think that you have been very expressive and clear and provided detailed explanations so far. So I don't have any specific questions, but I do like that you've been very informative and provided so much information for me. Thank you.
I'll say one thing, Lynn.
Please.
You know, the pension crisis, that's been kicked down the road since the 90s. That's why we're here, so clearly we cannot keep doing that, and it's beyond our control as to how we're gonna do it. The IMRF, though, also did another thing where they raised the retirement age to 67 for new hires. That doesn't necessarily work for first responders, in my opinion. So I don't know what plan the IML will come up with, but
Good question.
you know, it's gotta be more than just accounting.
Yeah.
And again, thank you to the firefighters for bringing that GEMT program to us, because that's been huge.
It has. And will be, I think, over time.
Yeah, it being a recurring thing.
Yep.
Well, does it suit the body to move ahead to now discuss an option to recommend to the council the levy option, because they must have this recommendation from us so that it can be published Thursday? Yes, Bill?
It comes out Thursday. I usually put it all to rest on Wednesday by the end of
Oh,
business
okay.
day, or into the
So,
evening.
don't all speak up at once. Go ahead. Okay, Tom.
As we discuss this, the pass-through from the federal government on state and community revenue discussions, and that goes all the way back to the CARES Act and how monies are gonna get back into the communities and when and where they're gonna address that. Seems that's on the table, and both sides, I think, have recognized that. It's a debate now as to how much that number is. We don't have any of that per se in here, right? beyond what we have in there for the CARES Act, which is related to the COVID costs.
We have the 1.3 million in here,
Right.
yeah, but not the 1.8. There's another 500,000.
Yeah, and I'm talking now about the revenue
Oh,
losses.
no, I'm not.
From the federal
no.
government. We have none of that in here. So as we discuss these things, I would, again, just ask to think through what the difference is. TIF 1 goes out next year, if I understand right, and that'll bring in another 325,000 in tax revenues. If I remember what our
It's
sharing
officially
portion.
terminated though, Tom, on December 31st, 2021, so we don't see the big bump until '22.
Okay, so we don't get the other
No,
300
I wish we did.
thousand.
We got a bump in 2020 from TIF 2 being
Right.
out.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
So I
Wish
just
it was
wanted to mention
otherwise.
those things.
yeah.
I like option 4, just because it leaves us, I'm not a gambler myself. So I like the least risky options always. We don't know what's gonna happen, but I think that we know that we don't know, and everything's been so predictable. I can't imagine when it'll be back to normal, but it probably won't be until, maybe mid-next year, towards the end. I think that option just gives us the cushion, but it's not too risky.
I would support 4 also.
Yeah, I would be in agreement. I mean, right now with everything that's going on, we really have to plan for a worst-case scenario.
Yeah.
So I really don't think we have another option.
Okay.
Yeah, I already marked off option 4 before, when I went through all this, so I was pretty confident, but I didn't know what would get raised here, so.
Well, I prefer option 4 as well. So, do we need to make a formal,
I think I get it.
Declaration.
You can if you want, I think I get the.
option 4? Option 4?
I'll be the only dissent on the group, I guess.
Pardon?
I said I'll be the only dissent on the
Oh,
group.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's almost unanimous, so that's fine.
Well, I'm sorry, I miscounted people in my head. Tell me which.
No, the comments I made earlier are pretty much the comments I wanted to make.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hang on.
Quick question for the chair,
Oh,
or
yes.
Mr. Terazinski. Then, Mr. Terazinski, would you be proposing an option 5 at 6.4, or what was your thinking?
Well, I guess the council has the luxury of another month plus to
Well,
make
we'll
this
be
final.
back at it. We'll be
Oh, yeah, right, we'll be back at it too. So the council has the luxury of another month and a half or so to get to a real final, the
Actually,
final dates.
they do legally,
For the levy.
but on the 26th, if I don't hear from them what they want, I can't prepare a budget.
Right.
And we're running out, every year, it's a train.
Right.
It starts. And I will caution everybody, if you want to go with 6.4, great. That's 400,000 out of the general fund reserve, so, it's coming from somewhere, so,
Right.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
which,
Well, that was about what that normative number was.
yeah.
6.4, 6.5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So those were my comments, and, it's fine. We have a group and we vote.
And we don't have a rich uncle that can
That's
bail
right.
us out right now.
I just
I
wanted to
don't.
be sure that was
I don't.
what I was hearing, right?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So you're good now?
Yep.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
foregoing with what we have. We've done this before where we get 4 options and then we go with option 5, which is off the table. I think sometimes we make things harder than we need to be. If we really feel that within as a committee, we needed to discuss that. We're down to the wire, so I think we've got 4 good options. It's always a group consensus, and I think we have a group consensus here, so.
Okay.
Any more comment? Bill?
Thank you. I'm just gonna plow through the three capital funds that we've had
Oh, good.
in our focus for a couple of years in particular. It was a year ago that we were talking about the need to catch up in street repair, excuse me, and maintenance, and then also in some fleet maintenance and upgrades. And so some steps were taken by the city council. There was 4 cents raised on the local fuel tax, and one of those cents went toward the fleet enhancements, and 3 went along with the state's increase in motor fuel tax toward street maintenance. And I'll just tell you, it'll be even more apparent as you look at the full budget book, but and the narrative will probably explain it better. But the city has been, in recent years, alternating the bulk of its annual street maintenance between Fund 210, which is motor fuel tax, so that's where the state intends it will go. And because we're trying to stockpile some extra money in the motor fuel tax for bridge repair, the Lucinda Avenue Bridge and North First Street Bridge, that will start here. Engineering's already going on, and then some work next year, and then a lot of work the following year. We've been picking up in alternate years, most of the street maintenance responsibility in our general capital fund. So you've got a couple of spreadsheets in the back if you want to grab them, pull them out.
Would you give us the page number if possible?
Well, it's past we're not page, so it just says Fund 210. There are these color-coded ones in the back. You go past all those numbers for the general fund and the fund reserve and all that, and then you get to these.
Yep.
And I ran out of colors, so I did some cross-hatching. But motor fuel tax, the first one, Fund 210. This is pretty straightforward. There's some things that you can spend motor fuel tax on, a lot that you can't spend money on. You can spend it on street repair, maintenance. You're also able to spend it on salt to maintain the streets, and then electrical you see in here, which is pretty sizable, and that's because we can use it to offset the cost of lighting up our streets. That's it, though, basically those 3 things. There's some engineering fees that go with all this, but generally those are the categories. The next one, we may as well just take them one at a time. I did some color coding there, so the blue in FY '21 is some money. Some of this is passed through, by the way. If you look at the top under the revenue side, you see state grants. That's motor fuel tax, and then there's some more allotment. But we've got money coming yet from the collaboration between Representative Tom Demmer and Jeff Kiker, who got $1.4 million for improvements along Gurler Road and the new rural road that's being built to the east side of Facebook. So that's in there, and then street maintenance you see in the green. That's basically it. It's not a very exotic budget. The next one is more complicated, and that's Fund 400. A lot more colors there to show different priorities, and I wanted to walk through those with you. Again, state grants on the revenue side, big, huge, and that's all pass-through money. That's not COVID money like we're seeing in the operating side, but they're grants that we're going to get from state government for these capital purposes.
Bill, just a
Yes, sir.
Just a question on that. So that money was specifically part of the state's portion of the discussions on the expansion, and they came through, or are coming through at 2.9 million?
Not quite all of that, but they're coming through. 1.4 million from Kiker and Demmer, and then there's other money that will come through. There's a $1.5 million grant that actually goes to Ferrara for, well, it doesn't go to Ferrara. It was because of Ferrara that we got that money, and that will be the intersection improvements at 23 and Gurler Road that start in the spring. We weren't able to get that done this year. It was too much planning that had to go, but it's gonna happen. It'll be a signalized intersection at 23.
So just from an overall perspective,
So it's 1.5, it's about 2.9.
from an overall perspective, is that enough to cover the bill?
It
The
is.
2.9, okay, so we don't have to.
Well, so, I'd have to go back through the deal. So the deal, actually, most of the infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, and road, are being funded by private dollars, Ferrara and Facebook. Facebook, the larger share of that amount, some $6.5 million worth. It was an interesting negotiation, and I can tell you, brought tears to my eyes when I kept saying, we don't have any street money. We have some water money. The sanitary district's ready to play on the sewer side. But when it comes to roads, we had the 1.4 million from Denver Kiker. That's the old Rebuild Illinois bond money that was created in 2018 and was still available to us. That's like membership money, not quite at the state level. And they swung all of their focus to us. It's great, wonderful, because it would really help the region as well. The rest had to be made up somewhere else, and we weren't gonna borrow for it. We have no debt service revenue. We couldn't do it, so.
Yeah, no capacity.
In the end, it was like playing Texas Hold'em. The chips just came on the table and they weren't ours. So it was, frankly, everybody knows I'm getting a little weak in my old age. I came real close to breaking down. But that made the projects. So heaven, and they don't want us to talk a lot about it, but that's true.
Great.
And it's terrific.
That's the only question I had.
So, lots of money can go into the street improvements, as you see down at the bottom, like almost all of that, and then some other monies will go into maintenance. And then toward the bottom, you see there's kind of a pink, or it's a pastel, I don't know what that color is. We have body cams for the police department. We have we have some IT expenses, fees for some upgrades. We're at the end of the line with a couple of our software programs, and including BSNA, which is our internal program, and no other place to do that. We also, we're coming to the end of TIF, so the money that is going to come online next year is collected this year and paid out next year. So really, TIF as an engine is over at the end of this year. And that is bad news for the airport. And it's been in the TIF since the beginning. And we've spent mightily there, some $42 million or so. We've got the second runway and taxiways, and there's been some upgrade into paving and so forth. State and federal government have been very kind to us, and we've had some lobbying efforts along the way, coming out at the end of a contract right now with the Daily Group. But it's over, and there's no other funding source that can fill that in. So from here on, when there needs to be upgrades, it's going to compete with street maintenance. So it's a kind of street for airplanes, but it's going to have to compete, and the council will have to roll up sleeves, every year and look at what we can do. Yes, sir.
Was the airport any part of the discussion with Ferrara and Facebook?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
And mostly a positive. Facebook, interestingly, is located right at the beginning of the navigation approach for the new runway. So we had to go to the FAA and get, they've had some cranes down there, and we had to get special, at night they come down, they don't stand up there, and but during the day, we just give an advisory, and we're general aviation, so there's no tower to say, hey, you're getting a little close, So people watch Ferrara, they just noted it's a good engine, they thought, for the community, and both companies feel that they will generate more interest in the area, so that it may serve others even better than them. There may be some in and out. They're not, Ferrara isn't gonna bring in cargo, Facebook isn't gonna bring in cargo, but there might be corporate visits and that type of thing. We're there. So that's, Fund 400 is our only general capital fund with recurring sources of dollars. And then finally, here we can get back to the lease question. Fund 420, so when the capital leases are figured, they don't just look at where you are for the year in terms of lease payments, but, what was the actual cost you bought into? And we had 13 vehicles in one batch, and 10 of those were from the general fund side and 3 from the water fund side. And then a smaller lease package through a company that does the big units, like the ambulance and a big tandem truck, a dump truck. Put all those together, and the percentage was they were different for the two packages, but in the low 2%, and so the lease was calculated over the overall debt incurred.
And have those been delivered, the vehicles?
No, so you don't see that for 2020. We might get one. That's not true. We don't have any of the main package of vehicles, and they're not probably to come until January. So it's all gonna fall the first year of the 2021. But they'll start coming off pretty quickly. It's their five-year leases, and this next year, we're gonna be buying, so we have to find a balance, right? So 2 years from now, we can go back and maybe do another packet of leases, but this year, we have just a few vehicles. We're gonna buy those, if the council's willing, out of pocket. It's gonna shape up better in terms of our debt service capacity. Debt service-wise, I think, and the Moody's guy was surprised. We're coming off, in the next 10 years, so long as we don't.
I thought it was remarkable. You had like 80-some-odd% repayment over 10 years of your total debt. That's very good.
We're aggressive about
Yeah,
it,
that's-
and if everything else holds up, and we find a pension solution.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So,
Well, colleagues, is there anything else you would like any of you would like to add for this evening?
Just in general, we'll be revisiting some of this. We'll be
In a month.
revisiting some of this in a month.
Yeah.
If there's clarification and so forth and questions, we can
Yes,
keep the doors open, and
yes.
great.
Let's see, that's what, the 16th of November or something like
16th and
that?
the 18th,
Okay, yeah,
Monday, Wednesday.
yeah, yeah.
Appreciate it.
That's where it's a gut-wrenching, we'll walk through every fund, every department,
Gut-wrenching.
it's good.
Oh, it is electrifying, yes.
You gotta bring your roller skates.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if there is nothing else for the good of the order, do I hear, are you satisfied?
I'll move.
All right. Nothing else for the good of the order. Is there a motion to adjourn this very productive meeting?
So
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ruth, do you have to do roll call?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Higgerson,
here?
Here.
McGill,
Say yes.
Yes.
McGill,
Yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Parch,
Yes.
Tarazinski,
Yes?
Washington,
Yes.
6 yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. much to the firefighters and the police officers and the union folks and all the street folks and everybody. Thank you. You're great. I appreciate it.